The Montebello Mansion in Suffern was the location for a forum on October 30th on navigating the financial markets in the current administration. It was presented by Westfair Communications, publisher of the Westchester and Fairfield County Business Journals and WAG Magazine, the real estate firm Compass, Halstead Real Estate, and Gary Goldberg Financial Services. A panel of 6 looked at the uncertainties in the financial life of the country and what's being done to cope. They included Bill Krivicek, Chief Investment Officer of Gary Goldberg Financial Services, Lawrence Kaiser, attorney, accountant, and partner in the firm Stern, Kaiser, and Pankin LLP, Gary Goldberg, Elizabeth Brucker, mortgage loan originator for residential lending at First County Bank, Louise Phillips Forbes, associate broker with Halstead Manhattan, and Ted Yang, managing director of the Westbury Group.
One of the biggest mistakes individuals make is they overreact to the ups and downs of the market. The reason you're in the market is because you don't want a CD, which is kind of a lake versus an ocean. The ocean is the stock market. The current environment is different, but not really different. We had a 10% or so correction back in February, then all of a sudden, markets went right back up. We're having that kind of a correction. It's kind of consolidated right now. We almost had a 10% correction in a week, in 2 days the other day. And the kind of corrections we're experiencing are healthy.
So whenever you look at economic data, it doesn't matter if it's labor markets, interest rates, there's many schools of thought, and no one school is correct. But, you know, labor markets are pretty strong. I mean, we have a very low unemployment rate. You can argue that some of these jobs are not good paying jobs. It really comes down to what are the advancements in productivity. And, you know, you have to put everything together. And yes, you know, wages are starting to go up. Wage inflation is good. That's the only type of inflation we like because we have more money in our pockets. And let's face it, the U.S. economy is all about the consumers. So, you know, you really can't look at that by itself. You got to look at everything together. And the advancements in productivity, just the automation that we have today. It used to take 3 people to come to your house to do something. Now it's 1 and a piece of equipment. Same thing, you know, inside of factories. So I don't consider that to be an issue, you know, because it's only one variable. And, you know, any economy that's at full employment is good because it does create some wage inflation. And we're okay with wage inflation provided that it's modest.
On the Republican tax changes.
Well, I don't think there's any question that the major benefit has gone to big corporations. The drop in the rate from 35% to 21% is huge. The genesis of it was that when the corporate rate dropped to 35%, and I think that was in the 86 Act, it had been as high as 50%, 49%. And the 35% at that time was pretty much the rate that other countries had for their businesses and their corporations. What's happened since then is that rates in other countries have gone down, and the U.S. at 35% was really at a competitive disadvantage. So the theory was to bring the rate down to 21% to encourage U.S. businesses to invest in the U.S., to discourage U.S. businesses from investing abroad, and to hope to incentivize corporations to spend that tax cut on U.S. operations. And there's been some attempt to do that. I think it's kind of half-hearted to give a $2,500 bonus to your employees. That's a stimulus, but you know, so they buy a little bit more at the grocery store that week. But I don't think we've really seen the kind of investment in the U.S. that we've hoped to.
On mortgage interest rates going up.
The concerns of interest rates, if you really think about it, rising interest rates is not necessarily bad. And it's still historically one of the lowest interest rates we've had. So is it actually the culprit that's causing the weakening in the housing market? I don't think it is alone. I think it's coupled with, and we're beginning to see it right now, is the famous 2017 Tax Cut Job Act. The states that are hurt by this are the states with the highest property tax and the highest property values, and that is actually the Northeast. Well, someone will say, well, what about the West Coast? Well, the West Coast is number 21 in property tax. If we look at the tax statistical data, it puts New Jersey as the highest tax. It's New Hampshire follows, New York and Connecticut next, and Vermont. So we're the ones that are being hit by this tax cut.
We're trying to navigate this administration, and we're trying to navigate creating wealth for ourselves and security for the long term. Part of that is always going to be real estate. You know, in my experience, it's been the greatest tool for creating wealth. I like to put my money where my mouth is, and I own 5 pieces of property. And, you know, interestingly enough, if I share my own story with my buyers or my sellers, is that I paid the highest purchase price every single time in that moment in time, on that street, in that building, sometimes not once but twice when I duplexed. And it's been the right decision for me because I had a long view. And one of the things that we forget is that of all these investments, there's only one thing that's a user asset, which is your home. So it's always going to be a part of the American dream to own your own home, whether how big it is or how small it is. I know that my market, New York City market, is an indicator of what's to come for other markets nationally.
On doing business deals.
That's right. So I get the question of, is now the right time to sell my company? Is now the right time to start a company on the venture side? And my answer is yes, because it is a seller's market. So if you're looking at, so again, on the selling side of a company, if you've got cash flow, people want cash flow and they're paying high multiples for that. Let me also mention, I have a company that's based in China. So I am exposed to tariffs. And, you know, one of the interesting things, you know, that I find, and I'm out there at least once a year, is that they're still very, very upbeat about the state of America. So even though, you know, our president and their president, well, actually they love each other, right? But relative to their tariffs and the trade war, don't really love each other. The average person still thinks that things are going great, you know, relative to their economies. Now, you can hear what...
Are you talking about in China or here?
Both, but I actually mentioned China.
Yeah, okay.
And so, you know, China has an issue with leverage and all these kinds of things. We can go into details later if you want. But relative to tariffs, the average person doesn't want this to happen, right? And so, you know, the issue of tariffs and uncertainty, I think, is the biggest problem. That's causing some downward pressure on not just stock prices, but also, you know, companies like myself and other places where people simply don't know, right? The cost of manufacturing has gone up certainly by at least 10% for most industries, unless you've managed to know somebody in the Trump administration, in which case you're hooked up. But other than that, is that going to be 25? Is it going to be more? I think in the long run, the average person in neither country wants this.